All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Uh, for just like a small disclaimer, this meeting will be recorded. If you don't like to be viewed or like you don't like being recorded, you can view the video later on YouTube. So, thank you all for joining. Like always, this is also like one of the amazing .vvm meetups. We have amazing line of speakers. First is Thomas, the .vm author itself, and then Daniel, our very own developer advocate. So, this is the agenda for today's meetup. So, first talk will be from Thomas, where he will be talking about .vvm 3.1 and upcoming new features. And second, that will be like session will be from Daniel. Uh, I hope you have remembered the last session, the very cool demo from Daniel. So this time also, like Daniel is back with this time. Daniel is also back with new demo as well. So our first speaker is Tomas. So Tomas will be so like Thomas doesn't need an introduction. He is the CEO of Reganti, and he is a Microsoft MVP. And also Thomas is like a very known speaker in European community, and he has been very active with .NET community. So without further introduction, over to you, Thomas.
Okay, so can you see the screen? Thanks for the introduction.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, so I have picked one of the features we are planning for .vvm 4.0. So this is a very early preview into the .vvm kitchen because this is even not published on a NuGet. I'm using our internal testing build of .vvm 4.0, but the feature is already working. We are still improving the API, and I hope that you will like it. Before I show the demo, I have just the typical intro slide. So if you are new to the .vvm community, so .vvm is an open source framework that helps you with building new web applications in .NET with the model view model approach. And it can also be used to modernize old web form applications and moving them to .NET Core or .NET 5 and 6. So if you are interested in this modernization scenario, go to our YouTube channel and you will find more resources about that. So we have been releasing new versions of .vvm. We have started releasing new versions of .vvm quite regularly. So in March, we released .vvm 3.0. In July, there was .vvm 3.1, which brought a lot of new features and fixed a lot of problems. But there was quite a lot of new stuff in .vvm 3.1. A lot of things that didn't make it into .vvm 3.0. And we are almost ready to release .vvm 3.2. I guess it will be out in a few days. We have just fixed the last bug, which we found. And .vvm 3.2 is more a bug fix release because it contains a lot of fixes to problems the problems we found after releasing 3.0 and 3.1, because .vvm 3.0 had a lot of fundamental improvements in the core part of .vvm, and of course, though we tried to not to create any breaking changes, there were some. So we are still working on fixing all these issues when we are using .vvm ourselves on migrating real-world applications. So 3.2 will fix some issues that appeared in 3.0 and 3.1. So if you have already migrated to .vvm 3, make sure to upgrade to 3.2 because it's the most stable release we will have, and we will be, of course, supporting and maintaining. And until the end of the year, we plan to release DotVVM 4.0, which will bring other new features. This time, there are not so many internal improvements in the core. In the core framework, we haven't been rewriting a lot of things. So that's nice because it means less breaking changes. However, there will be one important change. We will be dropping support for Internet Explorer. I hope that nobody is using this ancient browser anymore, but still, until .vvm 3.2 IE is still supported, and from .vvm 4.0 we will remove the support for it. So we will be supporting only modern browsers, like everything based on Chromium, like Firefox and Safari, and basically that's it. Yeah, so that's the new thing in .vvm 4.0, that we will be able to get rid of a lot of legacy code which is present in the framework just because of the support of Internet Explorer 11. And the biggest issue we are seeing in .vvm applications right now is that it's quite difficult to build your own components. If you are building any larger application in .vvm, you will probably have some repeated pieces of markup or repeated elements in the page, and you will want to make some kind of reusable controls out of this kind of markup. And .vvm historically offered two ways how to do it. First is the markup control. So you basically copy the piece of markup, put it in a separate file with the dot control extension. And if you want to pass some parameters into it, you can create a code behind class and define your custom properties there. This approach works, and it's great for components which are not very universal. Typically, it's some repeated piece of markup that appears in one application, but it's not very typical that you would take the markup control and use it in a different application, because it will probably be very application specific. If you want to create a universal control that you can use in dozens of applications, then you will probably use a count-only control approach, which is basically means that you will write the control as a C# class, maybe with some piece of JavaScript that can be embedded. And however, this is very universal approach. Basically, all the components we have been writing and we have created in .vvm are using this approach. So all the framework controls are the code-only controls. However, this is quite difficult to write, and it requires a lot of knowledge of the things that are present in the framework. So it's not a very nice way. And if you look how .vvm components are implemented, you will see that even the most simple components like a button or text box, they are not very straightforward. It's quite a lot of code, because this approach, even though it's very universal and it can do everything, it's not very it's not very straightforward to write components this way. So we see this as the biggest limitation, and that's why we decided to address this in .vvm 4.0. And we have a new syntax that simplifies a lot of things. Not all of the things, there are still some gaps we would like to fill, but on the other hand, it's much better than it was actually. So let's see. I have a demo prepared. So I have this very simple project, and I'm using .vvm 4.0. It's an internal preview build, so it's not available on the public NuGet right now. If you want to try it, you can go to .vvm repo and go to the v4-main branch. You can download the clone the repo and build your own version of .vvm, or just wait a few days, because we will be publishing a public preview of .vvm 4.0 quite soon. I guess it will be the next week or in the week after that. So in basically 1 or 2 weeks, after we try it on some internal projects right in the team. Yeah, so I'm running DotVVM 4.0 preview, and as you can see, I have a very simple page. It just uses some custom controls. So I've registered these components from this controls folder in my application, and it's a very simple control. Basically, it just renders an image. Yeah, so I get some image URL and some size of the control, and basically I want to render this image. And if this image is not specified, if the property is null or empty string, I will just generate a thumbnail, some placeholder of the specified size. Yeah, and there is some default value for the size, so I'm just using that. So instead of just creating the image, I will use this control, pass an image URL, and if there is the image URL and if it's not empty, then this picture will be just rendered with the size of 200 pixels. And if I don't specify the image URL, you will see a placeholder. So if I run the page, it will look like this. So just look at this first section. So this is the image, and this is the thumbnail, because the second instance of the control, it doesn't have the image URL specified. So this is kind of universal. You can use it for displaying user profile photos, because some users don't want to set the photo. So you can display some alternate image. Of course, this doesn't look very nice, but I'm not a graphics guy, so that's why it looks so ugly. Okay, but the principle of this component is that it specifies two properties. So if you want to pass some parameters in the markup, which I'm doing here, I'm passing image URL and size to the control from here, these properties. So you need to create a code behind class, and it looks like this. It's just a C# class you need to derive from .vvm markup control, and you need to declare these ugly properties. And this is the biggest pain, because for defining one property, basically you just need this. You need to put this boilerplate code because of how .vvm properties are designed. They need to have this descriptor field, which allows .vvm to store data binding expressions within the properties. And if you don't want to write everything by hand, you can say something like .prop and press tab, and it will expand this code. But still, you can see I have two properties here, and it takes almost the entire screen. And there is a lot of places where you can make a mistake. For example, if you don't specify the same name of the class here, the property will be registered on another place, and it's hard to debug. So this is not very nice approach. However, until .vvm 4.0, this is the only possible approach. So we are planning to create something like this. It's not in this release yet, but it's already been working on. So we want to define something like property, string, image URL, and it can be a binding. So it would be I-value binding of string, image URL. You will be able to specify some default value maybe, or other options. For example, the allow or is required equals true, or something like that, that this property is required. So that's what we think to introduce, and it will be a replacement of this base class. And if the control has these properties, you can then reference them via underscore control dot and name of the property. So that's what I'm doing here. So let's So this is the markup control. It's nice if you just need to reuse a piece of markup code and substitute some values in it. However, if you need to do something more complicated, like to generate controls dynamically based on the data, this approach has a lot of limitations. This is just basically a placeholder for some kind of markup. So I have a second control here. It's called thumbnail list, and it's how the code-only controls are written. So it's again, it's a C# class. I'm defining these .vvm properties, and this is not something new because it's the same as in a markup control. So this is pretty annoying, and I want the control to display this title, and just then generate this from a collection I will pass to the control. So if you look how the control is used, I'm passing a data source to the control, which gets some collection, a list of person objects. And I need to tell the control which property will be treated as an image URL. So I say, okay, use this property in the person class as the image URL. Yeah, you can see the same approach for the combo box component in .vvm and other controls. Yeah, so basically you pass the collection, and then you need to tell the control which property will serve as the image URL for the thumbnail. Yeah, because this doesn't need to be exactly a collection of the person objects. It can be a collection of anything. So this doesn't need to be a property. It can also be an expression. You can compose the URL from some ID of the person and some URL prefix or something like that. So I want to use this. So that's how my control looks, and you can see I'm specifying the title, which is just the this text, as some default value. Then I'm specifying data source, and you can see it can be any kind of collection, any collection of any values or any objects. And I'm specifying the item image URL binding. And because I need to change the data context for this binding, I need to use these two attributes. Basically, basically this expression is not using the same data context like this expression because I'm in this default view model. So the people is defined in the default view model. However, this image URL is not defined in the default view model. It's defined on the person class. So basically, these attributes needs to indicate that the control should look in the data source property, and it's a collection. So it should look at the elements of this collection, and that's the data context the binding expression will be evaluated in. Yeah, so you need to use these two attributes to tell .vvm, okay, this binding is based in some different context. And then in the init method of the control, I will generate the HTML generic control with the heading of the second level, and I will set the inner text to the title property and add the control to the children collection. So this thumbnail list, it starts empty, and it will just add this title inside. And then I'm adding a repeater. I'm setting its data source. I just take the value of the data source I have here, and I'm just passing it to the repeater. And then I need to generate an item template. If you are using repeater, you need to tell the repeater how each element will work. So basically, I'm creating this template from code. So I'm creating a new delegate template, and it's not very obvious here because I want to use a markup control inside, and I cannot just say var control equals new thumbnail placeholder because the markup control has the markup file. So I need to .vvm to use this markup file, not just the code behind class. Yeah, so if you want to create an instance of the markup control from the code behind, this is these three ugly lines of code. You need to get the control builder factory and tell .vvm, okay, I want this control, and you will need to tell, okay, it will give you some method you can call, and it will create the control for you. So this is quite nasty, but you cannot do this because this thumbnail placeholder is a markup control. Yeah. So this is also not very nice. And this is typical .vvm 2.0, 3.0 approach. There is no other way how you can do it. Yeah, so this is not very nice. And you will be, and then I will set the image URL property to this control, and I will just take this binding. It already has a change data context, so it will work. and I'm just getting this value and passing it here. And the size, it's a normal constant, so I will set the default size to 200. And again, I will add the repeater to the children collection. And it works, but the control for rendering something trivial like this, it's not very nice. It's quite long, and of course, this took me quite a lot of time to create, because also these things are not very well documented anywhere. So it's not very nice approach. So in DotVVM 4.0, we want to do the things quite differently, and we want to make this simpler. So let's look how it will work in DotVVM 4.0. Of course, these traditional ways will still work, because we don't want to make breaking changes. So that's how you can also implement the controls in the future. But it's not very nice. So I hope that the new approach will become very popular. So let's look at the thumbnail list first, because this is the new approach. And basically, you can write a class which inherits from composite control. And the only thing you need to do is to declare a static method called getContents. The name of the method is important. It must be getContents, yeah, because it's a static, so there is no interface, nothing that could enforce this name. So it's just based on the convention. So it needs to the name needs to be getContents, and this method should return the controls. Basically, it should build the content of this control. Yeah, so that's great if your control is composed of some other controls, some other existing controls. And this method can have some parameters. So the first parameter is value or binding title, and this tells DotVVM, okay, it can be a value or it can be a binding. It can be basically both. Yeah. So no matter if you in the markup, if you just use this like value, just the value is hard coded in the markup, or if you will use this binding expression, yeah, it will support both kinds of assignments. So this is the value or binding. You can say by the attribute the default value is photo list, and that's it. Then you need a data source, and it needs to be a binding. It doesn't make sense to put the collection in the markup. There's even no way how to pass it to the control. So it needs to be a binding. So you can directly request, I want I value binding. Yeah? And in the markup, it needs to be a value binding, or like this. And I need the binding for the item URL, so it will work the same. I will be using the same data context change attributes. This is the same, but you just need, okay, and I will need a binding which will give me a string, and it will tell me how to get to the image URL from the collection. So that's how you declare the properties. It's much shorter. It's much more convenient, but still you are not losing any features because you can use all these attributes. And the method can either return just single .vvm control or an IEnumerable of .vvm control. So if you need to return 2, you can do it like this and using the yield return syntax. So I will return an HTML generic control h2 with the inner text like this. You can pass the value or binding into this set property method, and it will just take care of it. If it's a value, it will assign it directly. If it's a binding, it will assign it to the bindings collection. It will just work. So the value or binding type is really helpful because it can treat both options here with a single assignment. And then I need a repeater, and I need to pass a data source. Again, this set property is quite intelligent. So if you pass iValue binding, it will just do what it's supposed to do. So you don't need to care of if you need to call set value or set binding. You can just say set property, and it will just handle all the cases that might occur. And this repeater, you can just set the item template. And because I will rewrite also the markup control with the image to a composite control, I don't need the ceremony with the control builder factory. So I can just say new composite control, this concrete composite control, and set the properties. The only problem is that there is no way how to infer these names. You need to pass them as strings because they are specified as these parameters, and you cannot use name of to reference parameter names. So this is the only thing that bothers me, but it's not that bad. But you need to have these property names in strings. But again, you just take the property and assign it. And here, this set property to size, because this doesn't accept any kind of type, you need to use this value or binding and pass the constant into, you need to wrap it as I value, as a value or binding. Yeah, but maybe we can add another overload which will set the value just directly. It will make things easier. Yeah, but it's quite short when I compare to this, and both controls are doing the exactly same thing. So it's quite easier, and it's easier to maintain because it's not so much code. And so now I need to rewrite this into a composite control, and here it's also quite short, but there is one thing that I don't like, and right now we don't have any syntax helpers how to make it simpler, but that's what we will also be working on improving, because it's I don't like it very much. Okay, so it's easy. I need to get the image URL, which can be a value or binding, and if it doesn't have to be set, it can be null. If it's not set, then I will render the placeholder. So the control, this property is not required, so I can say default value equals null. And then there is the size. It's not bindable. It doesn't support data bindings because it doesn't make sense to dynamically change the placeholder size once it's in the page. So that's I'm using just int. If I would like the binding, I would use value or binding or I value binding, but this can be specified only as a direct value, not as a binding. So that's why I can use int. You can use the default value also like this. So that's very easy. That's very convenient. Yeah, so now we need to create the img element and set the alt text to a placeholder like we have here. Yeah, so that's easy. Then I will skip this lines and go here. I need to set the style height property to the correct number of pixels. So basically, basically I need to generate this. Yeah, and because there is the style height group, so I can do it like this. Yeah, so this is this I'm doing basically the same thing as here, yeah, but it's a little bit nicer. And thanks to this property group, I can do it like this. So I can say, give me the CSS styles, which is the descriptor for the style dash, and create a property of style dash height. Yeah, so that's it, and just assign the size and plus px, so it will be interpreted in pixels. Yeah, so this will do the exactly same thing as what I have shown here. So basically, that line generates this thing. And this is the biggest problem because the SRC has an expression inside. Yeah, it's not just that I'm just passing the image URL in the control. I need to build this expression. And that's where there are still some limitations because you need to basically consider two ways. There are two things that can actually happen. One thing is that the image URL is just a raw value. It's hard-coded in the markup. It's not data bound using a binding expression. Then you can just evaluate it, look at it, and just pass this or this in the control. So this is the first case. I'm taking, here I'm taking the image URL. It can be a value or binding. So there is a process function which has accepts two lambdas. First lambda is what to do when it's just the string, when it's just the value without any binding. And the second lambda tells, okay, we will do this in case it's a binding expression. Yeah. So if it's just a string, it's easy because if it's empty, I will just create this URL. If it's not empty, I will just return the v. And the only problem is then I need to wrap it again as value or binding of string. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to pass it here to the set attribute function. Okay, the second case, when it's binding, and now it gets a little more complicated. Data bindings in .vvm are basically translated to a link expression. So it's basically the system link expressions namespace. And basically, I need to do something like this. Yeah, so basically, it's the same here, but I cannot do it with the raw strings. I need to do it with expressions. Yeah. So basically, I can take this B, this binding, and the binding has a property parse expression binding property, and it will give me the link expression. So this returns the link expression that the user passed in the binding. So there will be something like this dot image URL. Yeah. And I need to take this dot image URL and substitute it here in this expression. So I need to basically pass it here and pass it here. And I also need to get this value and pass it here. And we have a function which is called expression utils.replace. And basically you can pass here a lambda with what you want to replace. And this is the expression. And then you pass two expressions which will just replace these things in the parameter. It will just replace these things. So this method will build an expression with these replacements. And then I just call b.derive binding, which will copy all the things I have in the binding, but it will replace the inner expression. And I'm just creating a new binding. Basically, I just took this image URL binding and wrapped it in this expression. Yeah, this is not very easy. It's quite complicated, but currently we don't have any syntax helper. I think that it's possible to simplify this syntax because this rewriting of the expression would be probably the most frequent scenario you will want to do. So basically, I guess we can do just some kind of this replacement or something like that. So I think that we will succeed in simplifying this API even more. But right now you need to do it. You need to do it like this. Yeah. So this is the only complication. If you need to transform the bindings passed by the user, it's not very easy. But I think that we can still work on and make it a little bit easier. Yeah. So this is how the composite controls can help, because you can see the syntax is quite shorter. And of course, it's more powerful than just the markup control, because if I want to decide if I render the image element or something else based on the data, then I can do it here because I can just calculate the name of the element, or I can return completely different hierarchy based on the parameters I will get here. So this is much more dynamic than the markup control. The structure of the markup control is static. You cannot change it. you can just substitute values, but not do any transforms of the content. Here, it's much more powerful because you are using C#. So that's it. And we are already using this. We are already using this approach. We are already using this approach to implement Fluent UI web components. It's a set of components by Microsoft. They originally wrote it in React. They are using it in Azure Portal, in Office 365, and other Microsoft applications. And now they have the version which is built on top of web components. It's a new standard, not very new, but it's a standard that allows anyone to extend the set of HTML elements that you can use in the page. So you can define, if you use a custom HTML element in the page using web components, you can define how this element will look like. And basically, we are using these wrappers for the controls. So for example, if you want to use a button in the Fluent UI, you will need to create a Fluent UI, Fluent button, and specify some text and handle the click event. However, with .vvm, we will be able to give you a little nicer syntax, so it will look more like a .vvm component. But under the hood, it will just render these web components. So, oh, sorry, I forgot to Visual Studio, I guess. Okay, I will do this. I'm sorry for the wait. I'll open a second project where I can show this. So basically, we have a set of components which are supported in the Fluent UI. Most of them are quite simple because if I want to render a button, it has about 6 or 7 properties or something like that. And I'm just emitting the Fluent button HTML element, and I'm just saying appearance, autofocus disabled, and basically passing just these values I got from the user. Sometimes we need to transform the binding because, for example, this enabled in .vvm, we are used to have the enabled property on most of the controls. However, the Fluent UI is using the opposite logic. You can say disabled on the button. So we have a function which can negate the Boolean expression. So it will just generate the opposite data binding. Yeah? And that's it. So this is how we can create a wrapper over the button. And if you want to use it, it will look like this. Yeah, so we will use Fluent :button and just handle the click event, handle the text property. We have some tests for the appearance, enabled, disabled, and things like that. Yeah, so this is quite nice. Also, we have introduced a support for a thing called capabilities, because some components are sharing a lot of properties that always work the same way. For example, many controls can specify either the text property or put some images or anything in the content. So for the button, I can just say the text on the button, or I can put the content inside of the button element. So I can also do this Fluent button and put the content inside. The extension that it's making so many problems. It doesn't know anything. It's the older version. It doesn't know anything about .vvm 4.0 features. So that's why it just doesn't recognize these properties. But you can put the content in the button. So you can put some image in the button and then your own text. And this is a very frequent combination. Most of these controls can either set the content by this or by this. So that we have a text or content capability, which contains both options, these two properties. They are both nullable, so they don't need to be set at all, because one of them will be probably set, the second one will not, so they are both optional. And then you can just use it in the sorry, here, you can just use it here, and it will just allow you to use the text or content property inside. So thanks to the capabilities, you can share and reuse a lot of combinations of properties and their behavior just by creating a capability for this. I'm doing the same things for controls which have the data source. For example, I have the list box, but there is the list box, there is the combo box, and there is the drop down somewhere. Cannot see it. Never mind, but there are more controls like that. Yeah, so there are more controls like that, and I'm using this capability which contains the shared property. So there is the data source, item text binding, item value binding, item enabled binding, and selected value. All the selector controls have these properties. So instead of writing these 6 parameters for every control that may use it, I'm just using this capability. And of course, I can create an extension method that will apply this selector to a repeater control, so it will generate the template for me, and I can also reuse this logic quite extensively. Yeah, so I'm just using, okay, I will be rendering a repeater with the repeater items and apply selector data source, and I'll just pass the capability and it will configure the repeater for me. Yeah, so this is quite easy to create, and it allows you to share the logic between controls that are similar. Okay, so that's what you can look for in .vvm 4.0. Check out our homepage or the documentation, or engage in the discussions in .vvm repo. Of course, if you find a bug, we will be very happy to talk to you, and hopefully we will be able to fix the bug. And of course, we will be happy for your feedback. So if you have any questions, any concerns, thoughts, ideas, let us know. We will be happy to help. So thank you, and I hope that you will try the new version of .vvm 3.2 or even 4.0 quite soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Thomas, for the great session. I hope basically removing the legacy code for IE will be much more efficient for .vm for 4.1, 4.0, and then further. So
I hope so.
if anyone have any, if anyone have any questions, feel free to ask now, or like ping us in WhatsApp or in chat here. I will ask on your behalf. Meanwhile, I will share my screen for the next presentation. Uh, okay, moving on to next session. So our next speaker is Daniel. Daniel is a developer advocate at .vvm and very active contributor of C# Corner and .NET committee, and he's also like very active in North America, and he's been very vocal about vocal in Spanish language. So last meetup, Daniel presented very cool demo on basically using .vvm for translation. So this time also Daniel is back with another cool demo. So Daniel will be presenting presenting a demo, a web application for capturing images and face detection. So over to you, Daniel.
Hey, thank you, Abdul, and hi everyone. It's a pleasure to greet you. I don't know why, but I'm a little nervous, but happy to be here and ready for the .vvm in action section. So to start, we can see directly the demo, and then we can see how to build that demo. So let me share with you the screen. Okay. And I'm going to turn on here and deploy the application. So this is the demo for today's session. In this case, this is a web application to uh, take a picture from our camera, web camera, and our application, and then we can detect our face. This is face recognition, and then get some attributes about our face. So I can start with some example. Okay, this is the photo captured the application in the application, and now we can analyze the image in the section, and then we can get some attributes. For example, a person male, 26 years old. That's right. The emotional happiness, facial hair no, and with glasses no glasses. This is the presentation. In this case we can do other example. For example, when we are sad because our app don't work. So in this part we can analyze these other images as well. For example, in this case the emotion is sadness, and this is the idea of this web application. So now we can see how this app works, how to build this application in .vvm. So this is the next part. In this .vvm in action section for the Meetup, we can see a web application for capture images and face detection. The environment of this solution have three parts. In a first way, a face API to recognize faces from an image and get some attributes. Then have a class library to work with this data, and then the most important thing, application to interact with this part. As a first point, we can have a web application or .vvm to interact with the user, get the picture, and call the class library through the model to have this communication. In .vvm web application, we can have, or we can call with JavaScript functionalities to in this case to take a picture from our web camera, and this is for example with webcam JavaScript function, and from .vvm we can call these functionalities from JS directive and get the file, the snapshot file of the image, and do the process. So in this case, I want to take this opportunity to talk about this communication between .vvm and JavaScript to take the picture in this case. So to do that, we can use the JS directive functionality that was introduced on .vvm 3.0, and this functionality allows you to interact between .vvm controls and JavaScript code. So to do that, we can follow the next steps. As a first point, we need to declare a module with the functions in JavaScript. For then, on .vvm startup in hspeak.net, we can register that module, reference it to JavaScript. And then with this reference, we can use that module in the .vvm views, importing only the most importing the model in the .vvm startup previously in the step 2. In the views, we can also call the JavaScript functions. For example, when we click a button, call some function on JavaScript, and that is the process. So let me show you that process to from .vvm call JavaScript functions. So I'm going to the solution that is a model view model approach. In this case, as a first point, remember, I have the JavaScript site in this case, And here, for example, we have a class. This is an app, the constructor, and the most important thing, that functions. For example, in this case, take a snapshot to to take the picture from web camera. So for that, we can have this class, and in this case, in JavaScript, export this instance of context app. For then we can reference this class in .vvm. So in the .vvm Star app in our project, we can go to this section, and in the part of configure resources, we can refer this JavaScript file in this section, uh, adding a new register in the resources as a first point with the URL resource location. In this case, is the site.js, the JavaScript, when the function is implemented. And in this section, we put the name of this resource. In this case, camera module. And in the other way, we can have references to dependencies. In this case, for example, we can refer other one in this section, and that is the library to work with webcam on JavaScript. So we can put the dependencies in this case, in this part, and that is we can have the module register here to use them. So now the only thing we need to do is refer to this resource in our views. In this case, I have, let me see here in the views, in the default view. In this way, we can use the JS directive reference the name of the module. In this case, remember, camera module, and the name here. That is, and now we can refer to the functions of JavaScript, like this function, take a snapshot. In this way, for example, we can have, or we have in this case, .vvm control, that in this case button, to refer to the function in JavaScript. In this case, we can have the click event, and reference the static commands, and refers the JS directive to invoke the JavaScript functionality. In this case, take a snapshot. Sorry, this function, remember, take a snapshot, and in this way we can have the communication from .vvm to JavaScript functions. That is, now we can have other process. In this case, for example, from the JavaScript, we can also call the one API to, for example, to send the file, for example, in this way with the post method. And in this section, for example, let me show you save image. In this class, have a controller to have a API to save the file. In this case, I'm saving this file and the www root folder. This is the image, for example, the last image that I take from the .vvm web application. So we can save here, and then we can, with this image, for example, in the view model, in this section, for example, in the view, we can also have other view button, for example, in this case, to call a detect option, and this is a method in the view model, in this section, detect, to refer, in this case, to the image file, in this way, camera photos in the www root, and then only calls the face API that is on Azure, and that face API refers to a face model, for example, to set attributes age, gender, emotion, face, hair, and something like that. And in the Face API, the only thing we need to do is refer, for example, an endpoint. This Azure resource, this is a resource to work with images, in this case for faces. And only thing in this case, get face with an image URL in the www root and set some attributes. When? Calling in this case add a face client to HTTP request to the face and detect uh, some attributes like that. So this in this case, the communication between .vvm and JavaScript, and now we can we can prove other examples to complement the session. Okay, here we go again. Okay. Sorry, I need to turn on my camera here on Teams. Okay. I'm ready now. Okay, we can take other picture, for example, to detect other attributes. For example, if I use sunglasses, let me take the picture. Okay. And we can analyze the image. Okay, and get again the attributes, for example, the attributes person, the motion, happiness. Facial hair, I don't have. And with glasses, yes, some glasses in this image. And we can prove other scenarios to this case. In other cases, in a real scenarios, for example, we can have a web form to detect or for register a person, and we can, for example, complete automatically some attributes and something like that. So in this case, thank you very much. I hope you enjoy and this demo on the DotVVM in action section for the meetup. And if you have any comments or if you need help, it would be a pleasure to collaborate with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel, for a very cool demo, and also like you look very cool in those glasses.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's the end of Daniel's session. If anyone have any questions with Thomas or Daniel, feel free to ping now. Or if you would like to present anything, you can join us now. And also, we will be posting this video on YouTube, so feel free to head over to our YouTube channel. And also, you can view our past meetup videos as well. I hope there are no more questions. So I think we can end this meetup. Thank you all for joining, and thank you, Thomas and Daniel, again for this amazing session. And we'll hope to see you in the next meetup.
Okay, thank you everyone. Goodbye, and have a nice evening or morning or whatever time is at your place.
Hey, see you in the next meetup.
Thomas,
Thank
you're
you.
on mute.
Okay, goodbye.